Hi guys, in this video I cover the switch statement. I go over an example with characters and I specifically point out in the example how the case fall through works. Let's start out by declaring a variable of type character named option. I prompt the user to enter a option between A to C, and then I read that option into the variable. Next, I declare a switch statement, and I'll use the option variable to check for the cases. So I have case A, case B, and case C. For each of the statements, I output a message. You selected A, and here you selected B, and for the last one, you selected C. Now I also need to add the break statement. If I don't add the break statement, it will fall through the next case. So for example, if A was selected and it matches the case A, this would get executed, and if there's no break, it will fall through and execute the statement under B as well. So I'll add a break statement to each of these cases. Next, let's try to run this program. So I enter it A, you selected A. If I enter B, you selected B, and so on. Now, if I enter an option that does not match any case, none of them will get executed, and the execution continues after the switch statement. Now, what happens if I want to have support for uppercase characters? For example, that if I'm a user and I select option A, but I enter uppercase, that also the statements in the case A block get executed. This is a perfect example where fall through is a good way. So let me add another case here. In this case, case uppercase A. And instead of duplicating the code, right, I could do something like this. You selected A, but this is now code duplication because it's the same thing. And if there's some processing going on, I don't want to duplicate the code. What I can do instead is just remove this here and leave it like this, basically like an empty case. But what will happen is if the user selects uppercase A, it will match to uppercase A. Note there's no break statement, so it will fall through to the next case, to the lowercase a case, and then execute the statements here. Now let's run this. So here I select uppercase A, and it will say you selected A. And if I enter lowercase a, it will also say you selected A. Now I will do the same for the other characters, for the other letters. So case B, and here case C. And now whatever character I enter into any casing, uppercase or lowercase, it will always pick the right option. What if a character is selected that is not supported? What I could do is add a default statement and, for example, invalid option. Now if I enter, say something invalid, G, it will say invalid option. Another scenario I can support is by default, if they select anything that's invalid, I just select option A. So I remove the default here and add the default on top. So what will happen is if none of these match, it will default to A. Let's try this out. Now if I enter, say G again, it will come you selected A. So it tries to match first the cases, and then if none of them match, it goes to the default case up here. There's no break statement. It falls through to uppercase A. No break statement again. It falls through to lowercase a, and then execute the statements here. So the default case can really be anywhere. Let's try this out. Let's say I select B, and you see default was not selected, even though it's the very first case. So regardless of where default is, if it's the very first case, it will not automatically take this case. Now I can also put default, for example, here in the middle. So what will happen now is if I select an invalid option, let's say I select E for enter, it defaults to B because this is where the default is. Fall through to uppercase B, fall through to lowercase b, and then execute the statements here. So you have a lot of power with switch statements. You have the power of fall through, but there's also the trap that you may forget to write the break statement. So always be sure to add the break statements when you need it. And be aware that you don't have to have it if you have a convenient case where you want to have the fall through power. Now, with the default statement, also most of the time you will see it's the very last case in the switch statement, but it doesn't have to be the last case. You can move it anywhere where it's applicable for your logic. Thank you for watching.